Welcome to Amplifying Impact, the podcast for leaders who strive to create exceptional experiences, develop high-performing teams, and lead with purpose. I'm Mark Watkins, the founder of Amplifying Impact Events. I bring decades of leadership experience rooted in the hospitality industry. However, because the pursuit of growth, excellence, and meaningful impact is a universal goal, the principles I share apply to leaders across all industries and sectors. Each episode delivers actionable insights and practical tools to help you amplify your impact on your team, customers, and community. You'll get valuable content, enough to make a real difference in your leadership journey. However, the complete transformation awaits you at our live events. Let's get started and amplify your impact together. You're drowning in your work that someone else could be doing. You're staying late while your team leaves on time. You're convinced that if you want something done right, you just have to do it yourself. And here's the brutal truth. You're not being productive. You're being the bottleneck. Welcome back to Amplifying Impact, the podcast where I equip leaders and build high-performing teams through field-tested systems that actually work. I'm Mark Watkins, your host, and episode 4 is part 2 in our 6-part series on the Impact Leadership Assessment Framework. In episode 2, I introduce you to the complete Impact Framework, the 6 elements that work together to create leaders who actually multiply their influence. Impact is an acronym, and it stands for Influence with Integrity, Multiply What Matters, Pursue Clarity and Excellence, Act with Intentionality, Cultivate Growth, and Transform Through Service. In episode 3, I shared the 360 Leadership Assessment, a tool that strengthens influence with integrity by exposing the blind spots that destroy your credibility. Today, I'm tackling the M, Multiply What Matters. If you took the Impact Leadership Assessment and scored lowest on this element, you're probably exhausted. You're working harder than anyone on your team, staying later, handling more, but you're really not seeing the proportional results. You've become the expert problem solver that everyone depends on, but you haven't built a team that can solve problems without you. You're adding value, but you're not multiplying it. And that's exactly what today's tool is designed to fix. Delegation Readiness Matrix. This isn't another delegation framework that tells you to let go or to trust your team more. This is a systematic assessment tool that helps you determine who's actually ready to receive delegation and who needs development first. Because here's what most leaders get wrong. They try to delegate tasks without first assessing whether their people are ready to receive these delegated tasks. If you're tired of being the only person who can get things done right, if you want to scale your impact without working 80-hour weeks, this episode will change how you think about delegation. Before I share this tool, if you're finding value in this series, please take a moment to subscribe to Amplifying Impact Podcast wherever you're listening. It helps other leaders discover this field-tested frameworks and ensures that you don't miss the remaining episodes in this series. Now let's talk about why most leaders fail at delegation and what works instead. Let me tell you about a leader I worked with. I'll call her Sarah. Sarah was a director of operations for a multi-unit hospitality business. Brilliant strategist, incredible work ethic, deeply committed to excellence, and completely burned out. When I first met Sarah, she was working 65 to 70 hours a week. She arrived before her team and left after them. She handled escalated customer issues personally. She reviewed every major decision. She approved every significant project. Her team, they were capable people, motivated, experienced, but they had learned something dangerous. If they waited long enough, Sarah would just handle it herself. And here's what Sarah told me in our first conversation. I know I need to delegate more, but every time I try, it doesn't get done the way I would do it. So I ended up doing it anyway, which takes more time than if I had just done it myself in the first place. Sound familiar? Here was what was actually happening with Sarah and what happens with most leaders who struggle with delegation. Sarah would get overwhelmed, decide to delegate something, hand it off to whomever seemed available or willing, and then hope for the best. Sometimes it worked. Often it didn't. When it didn't work, Sarah blamed herself. I must be bad at delegating. I must not be explaining it clearly enough. I should just do it myself. But here's what Sarah didn't see. The problem wasn't her delegation skills. The problem was she was delegating randomly without assessing whether people were actually ready to receive what she was handing off. She was giving complex strategic work to people who needed more development first. She was trusting capable people who had proven they wouldn't follow through consistently. She was treating everyone on her team as if they had the same readiness level when they clearly didn't. So what's the real cost of being the bottleneck in your organization? When leaders don't multiply what matters, here's what it costs. First, you create learned helplessness in your team. When you're consistently taking over or redoing work, you train people not to try. They learn their best effort isn't good enough, so why bother? Second, you limit organizational capacity to your personal capacity. Your business can only grow as fast as you can personally handle work. When you're the bottleneck, growth stalls. Third, you prevent real leadership development. The only way people learn to handle complex work is by actually doing it with coaching, not by watching you do it. Fourth, you destroy your own strategic capacity. If you're buried in operational tasks others could handle, you're not focused on the high-level work that only you can do. And fifth and finally, you're headed for burnout. You can't sustain 65-hour weeks forever while your team only works 40. Eventually, something will break. Here's the phrase I want you to remember. Only do what only you can do. That's the principle behind multiplication. Your job as a leader isn't to be the best at everything. Your job is to develop others to handle what you used to do so that you can focus on only what you can do. But here's where most delegation advice fails you. It tells you to delegate more without giving you a systematic way to assess who's ready to receive that delegation. That's exactly what the Delegation Readiness Matrix solves. It gives you a clear, systematic assessment to determine which leaders are ready for immediate delegations, what I call the delegation queue, and which leaders need development or accountability first. Because delegation without readiness creates chaos. But systematic delegation based on actual capabilities, that's how you multiply. Let me explain how the Delegation Readiness Matrix works. The core insight is simple. Not all team members are equally ready to receive delegation. Some are ready now, some need development first, some need accountability structures, and some aren't in the right role at all. Most leaders treat delegation like a binary choice. Either you do it or someone else does it. But that's not how real organizational development works. Delegation Readiness Matrix assesses your leaders across two critical dimensions, capability and reliability. Capability measures whether they have the skills, problem-solving ability, and judgment to handle increased responsibility. Reliability measures whether they're consistent, follow through on commitments, and take ownership of outcomes. When you assess people on these two dimensions, you get four distinct profiles, four quadrants that tell you exactly what actions to take. So let's look at the four different delegation profiles. If a leader lands in quadrant 1, they're delegation ready. They have high capability and high reliability. This is your delegation queue, the leaders who are ready right now for increased responsibility. These people can and will. They have the skills and they have the consistency. When you hand them something, you can trust it'll get done. The action with leaders in quadrant 1 is to delegate freely with clear expectations. In quadrant 2, this is the development zone. They have low capability, but high reliability. These are people who will, but can't yet. They want to perform. They're consistent and they take ownership. They just lack the skills or experience to handle complex work independently. This is the hopeful zone. These are your future Q1 leaders if you invest in their development. The action here is a personal development plan. This is a 60 to 90-day systemic skill-building process that moves them towards readiness. Quadrant 3, this is the accountability zone. They have high capability but low reliability. These are the people who can but won't consistently. They have the talent and the skills, but they don't follow through. They're inconsistent, they require consistent reminders, and their ownership is questionable. This is the frustrating zone. You see the potential, but you can't count on them. The action with the leader in Q3 is a performance improvement plan. It's a 30-day structured accountability intervention that either restores their reliability or makes a personnel decision necessary. If a leader falls in quadrant 4, more than likely they're a wrong fit for the role. They have low capability and low reliability. These are people who can't and won't. They lack both the skills and the consistency. This is the honesty zone. When someone lands here, you need to face reality quickly. The action for a leader in this area is either going to be a demotion, a role change, and sometimes even separation from the organization. The goal is that everyone moves to either Q1 or Q4. You're either removing people from the role because they can't and won't do the job, or you're developing or correcting a leader to move them into your delegation queue. Here's the key principle. Quadrant 2 and Quadrant 3 are temporary holding zones with time-bound interventions. That is critical. It's important to understand that when we assess leaders with this tool and they land in Quadrant 2 or Quadrant 3, it's a temporary situation. We're holding them there so that we either hold them accountable or we develop them. You're systematically moving people towards Q1 through development and accountability. If they don't move to Q1 with a designated time frame, they move to Q4, and you make a tough decision about their role. The goal isn't to have people stuck in Q2 or Q3 forever. The goal is to build a team of Q1 leaders who are ready to amplify your impact. That's the delegation queue, the people who can handle what only you used to be able to do. If you want to dive deeper into frameworks like this, I publish monthly insights in my LinkedIn newsletter, The Leadership Hub, where I introduce field-tested concepts before I unpack them here on the podcast. You can find it by searching for Mark Watkins or The Leadership Hub on LinkedIn, or visit my profile to subscribe. Delegation Readiness Matrix is built on a systemic assessment process. You're evaluating each leader on your team across the two dimensions I mentioned, capability and reliability. Let me walk you through how the assessment works. So when we're assessing capability, it's important to understand that capability measures three things: skills and knowledge, problem-solving ability, and decision-making judgment. We use multiple assessment questions for each dimension, but here are a few examples of what we might ask. We may ask, can they independently identify and solve problems in their area? Do they know what to do when things go wrong? Do they make sound decisions that align with your standards and expectations? Can you trust their judgment? Based on the response to these capability questions, you determine whether they have high capability or low capability for increased responsibility. High capability means they have the skills, problem-solving ability, and judgment to handle complex work. Low capability means they need more development before they're ready for that level of responsibility. When we assess reliability, we're looking at three things: consistency, follow-through, and ownership. Again, we use multiple assessment questions, but here are a few examples. Do they consistently perform at the expected level, whether you're present or not? Can you count on them to maintain standards? Do they take ownership of their responsibilities and outcomes, or do you have to constantly check in to remind them? Based on the responses to the reliability questions, you determine whether they have high reliability or low reliability. High reliability means they're consistent. They follow through, they take ownership without constant management. Low reliability means that they're inconsistent and they require constant oversight to maintain performance. Once you've assessed capability and reliability, you plot each leader into their corresponding quadrant. High capability, high reliability, Q1. They're delegation ready. Low capability, high reliability, that's Q2. They're in the development zone. High capability, low reliability, that's Q3, the accountability zone. And if a leader is low capability and low reliability, that's Q4. More than likely, they're the wrong fit for the role. This gives you a complete picture of your team's readiness for delegation. You can immediately see who's in your delegation queue ready for increased responsibilities right now. You can see who needs development plans to build capability. You can see who needs accountability interventions to restore reliability. And you can see who's in the wrong role entirely. Here's where the system becomes powerful. Each quadrant requires a completely different action. For Q1 leaders, your delegation queue, the action is immediate delegation with clear expectations. You're not holding back anymore. You're giving them meaningful work that leverages their capability and reliability. For Q2 leaders in the development zone, the action is a personal development plan, what I call a PDP. This is a 60 to 90-day systemic process that builds the specific capabilities they're missing. You're coaching them, giving them progressively complex work, preparing them to move to Q1. For Q3 leaders in the accountability zone, the action is a performance improvement plan, a PIP. This is a 30-day structured intervention with clear metrics and expectations. You're saying, you have the capability, now I need to see the reliability. Here's exactly what it looks like, and here's the timeline. For Q4 leaders who are the wrong fit, the action is honest and direct. Demotion, role change, or separation. You're not dragging it out. You're making the decision that serves both the organization and the individual. Here's what makes the system work. Q2 and Q3 aren't permanent states. You're not letting people camp out in the development zone or the accountability zone forever. A PDP is a 60 to 90-day window. At the end of that period, they've either developed the capability to move to Q1 or they haven't. That tells you something important. A PIP has a 30-day window. They either restore the reliability quickly or you make a personnel decision. This creates urgency, it creates clarity, and it creates accountability for both you and your team members. You're building a team of Q1 leaders who are ready to amplify your impact, and you're making honest decisions about who shouldn't be in leadership roles. Now, what I've shared today gives you the framework and some sample questions, but the complete delegation readiness matrix includes multiple assessment questions for each dimension with systemic scoring methodology, detailed guidance on how to plot leaders accurately, complete PDP and PIP frameworks with templates, coaching strategies for moving people from Q2 to Q1, accountability scripts for Q3 interventions, and decision frameworks for Q4 situations. That's the complete toolkit we use in our workshops when we help organizations build their delegation queue. But even with the framework that I've shared today, you can start assessing your team differently. You can stop delegating randomly and start delegating based on actual readiness. Let's take a break here for a word from our sponsor.
The Delegation Readiness Matrix you're hearing about today is just one tool from the Impact Leadership Assessment Framework. But here's what makes this framework different. It's not just about individual leader development, it's about creating clarity for entire leadership teams about where to focus development energy for maximum organizational impact. Over the past year, I've shared the Impact Framework as an individual leadership tool. This February, I'm opening a small pilot cohort to apply the Impact Leadership Assessment with leadership teams. This pilot is designed for 2 to 3 business owners who want clarity before complexity and are looking for a structured way to identify where leadership focus will create the greatest return. The Impact Leadership Assessment is facilitated remotely, making it accessible for leadership teams without the need for travel or complex coordination. This pilot is ideal if your organization is growing and beginning to feel leadership strain, has capable leaders but inconsistent execution, wants a shared leadership language and development focus, values clarity, prioritization, and practical application. This is a focused, facilitated engagement designed to apply impact with precision. If you want to understand how facilitation changes the outcome and how leadership teams use the assessment to identify what actually matters most right now, I recorded a detailed walkthrough in episode 2 of this podcast. To explore whether the February pilot cohort is a good fit for your leadership team, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com to schedule a consultation. This isn't about adding another leadership program. It's about bringing systematic clarity to where your leadership development efforts will create the greatest organizational impact.
Welcome back. Let me bring this full circle with Sarah's transformation story. When Sarah first came to me, she was trying to delegate equally to everyone on her team. In her mind, fairness meant giving everyone the same level of responsibility. But fairness isn't equality. Is giving people responsibility aligned with their readiness. I had Sarah complete the Delegation Readiness Matrix assessment for her entire leadership team, 7 people total. Here's what she discovered. She had 2 Q1 leaders, delegation-ready people with high capability and high reliability. She'd been dramatically underutilizing them because she didn't want to play favorites. She had 3 Q2 leaders, people with high reliability and low capability in specific areas. They were willing and consistent, but they needed skill development before they could handle more complex work. She had 1 leader in Q3, someone with strong capability but inconsistent follow-through. Sarah had been making excuses for this person because when they performed well, but the reliability wasn't there. And she had 1 Q4 situation, someone in the leadership role who lacked both the capability and reliability. Sarah had been avoiding this reality for months, so here was the action plan. Once Sarah saw her team plotted on the matrix, the path forward became clear. She immediately delegated several major responsibilities to her 2 Q1 leaders: customer escalations, vendor relationships, weekly operational reviews, things that she'd been holding on to that were absolutely ready to handle. Second, she created a 90-day personal development plan for her 3 Q2 leaders. Each plan targeted specific capability gaps. 1 needed training in running and interpreting financial reports, 1 needed conflict resolution training, and 1 needed systems thinking development. She committed to weekly coaching sessions with each of them and gave progressively complex assignments to build the capabilities. Third, she put her Q3 leader on a 30-day performance improvement plan focused entirely on reliability metrics, clear expectations, specific checkpoints, and defined consequences. Fourth, she had an honest Q4 conversation. The person wasn't in the right role. They explored other options within the organization, but ultimately that person left for another opportunity elsewhere. 6 months later, Sarah's entire operation looked different. 2 of her Q2 leaders had successfully moved to Q1 through their development plans. Her delegation queue had grown from 2 leaders to 4. Her Q3 leader made the reliability shift and moved to Q1. A 30-day structure forced the issue, and in this case, it worked. Sarah was now working 40 to 45-hour weeks instead of 65 to 70. She'd freed up 20 to 25 hours per week for strategic work. Her team engagement improved significantly because people were getting responsibility aligned with their readiness. Her Q1 leaders felt challenged and valued. Her Q2 leaders saw clear development paths, and nobody was confused about expectations. And most importantly, Sarah stopped being the organizational bottleneck. Business could grow because leader capability had multiplied beyond her personal capability. Here's what Sarah told me. I used to think I was bad at delegation. Turns out I was just delegating to people who weren't ready. Now I know exactly who's in my delegation queue, and I have a systematic plan to move everyone towards readiness. I'm not working less because I'm slacking. I'm working less on operational tasks because I've built a team who can handle them. Now I can focus on what only I can do. That's the power of the Delegation Readiness Matrix. It doesn't just tell you to delegate more. It tells you exactly who is ready for what and gives you systematic tools to build readiness in others. Here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. First, multiplication requires delegation, but delegation requires readiness. You can't just hand things off and hope for the best. Second, the Delegation Readiness Matrix gives you a systematic way to assess who's in your delegation queue ready right now and who needs development or accountability first. Third, assess on 2 dimensions, capability and reliability. High in both means delegate now. Low in one means development or hold accountable. Low in both means make tough decisions. Fourth, Q2 and Q1 are temporary holding zones with time-bound interventions. You're systematically moving people towards Q1 or making personnel decisions about Q4. And fifth, your job as a leader is to only do what only you can do. Everything else should be in your delegation queue or moving towards it. If you want the complete Delegation Readiness Matrix assessment tool with all the questions, scoring methodology, PDP and PIP frameworks, and implementation templates, here's how to get it. The complete system is what I bring to organizations through the Amplifying Impact Events workshop. We don't just explain the framework. We help you assess your entire team, create development plans, and build capability structures that actually work. If you're ready to systematically build your delegation queue and amplify your impact beyond your personal capability, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com to explore bringing this training directly to your organization. Because multiplication isn't just about doing less work yourself. It's about developing leaders who can handle what only you used to be able to do, so you can focus on only what you can do now. If this episode was helpful to help you see delegation differently, I'd be grateful if you take 30 seconds and leave a rating or review wherever you're listening. It helps other leaders discover these frameworks and reminds me what's resonating with you. Thanks for joining me on the Amplifying Impact podcast. If this episode helped you see leadership differently, please share it with another leader who's ready to move beyond conventional approaches. Leadership is better when we lift each other up. For more resources or to explore bringing the Impact Leadership Assessment Framework to your organization, visit amplifyingimpactevents.com. You can also check out the full podcast archive at amplifyingimpactpodcast.com. Until next time, keep amplifying your impact, and remember, the world needs the unique leader that only you can be.